All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome. Thanks for being here today. Mayor Paulton Haken, I wanted to thank you for joining us. Thanks for joining us online. We got a lot of people here to speak today who all have different roles in updating you on what happened over the last 24 hours or so with the storms, not only in Sioux Falls, but across the whole east side of the state. First off, I just want to really express my thoughts and prayers to all the communities impacted by this, not just Sioux Falls, but as you've come to see already, some significant damage, even more damage north of here. So a lot of people impacted right now that are struggling with the damage of what's happened in the last several hours. Right next door, we have stood up an EOC, or Emergency Operations Center, and important for the public to know that we have a website that's going to answer a lot of your questions you have around this storm, around debris cleanup, around landfill, tipping fee, all this stuff that has to do with how we're going to respond. And that's at siouxfalls.org/storm. So please visit that page. We'll be adding information to it as we go along here, and we have more answers to questions as they come in. There'll be some more specific info on debris cleanup and how we're going to handle that in a little bit, coming from Andy Berg. A big resource we have when events like this happen is the helpline, 211. 211 is a great resource for you to call if you have a question or need an assistance with the cleanup, or you're challenged in some way as a result of the storm. Please call 211. They're here to take care of those needs. Sadly, we did have one confirmed fatality in Sioux Falls as a result of the storm last night, and we can't share the specific information about that individual yet, but I would just like to offer my thoughts and prayers, the thoughts and prayers of this community, as that family is waking up this morning with a very hard situation. So please keep them in your prayers as well. A few questions always seem to come in from weather events on tornado sirens, how they work. They are tornado sirens. We sound the sirens when there's a tornado and a confirmed tornado. There's not a confirmed tornado in Sioux Falls or even in Minnehaha County, and so our sirens do not sound. There are multiple ways to keep informed on the weather. There's weather radios. There's alerts on your cell phones. There's seeing the sky that looks like beef stew that tells you you should not be out right now. So tornado sirens are for tornadoes. We will continue to sound those sirens when there is confirmed tornadoes within our city and county. If you have damage reports or damages that you want to report, we would ask that you call 211 to report those damages as well. And two quick safety notes. Please stay away from power lines. There's still a lot of down power lines. Steve from Excel is going to touch on that here in a minute. They're dangerous. If you see a power line that's down and it's not flagged, that needs to be reported. If it's flagged, it's already been reported. And then we're still working to get a lot of intersections open. Please treat all the intersections as four-way stops. If there's no lights there, it's because they're not working. And so those got to be treated as four-way stops. So those are a few highlights from Sioux Falls right now. I want to turn it over to the governor, who's been traversing the east side of the state, to kind of give you a more global update on what's happening with the storm. Governor?
Well, good morning. We had an unprecedented weather event here in South Dakota yesterday. We have had many storms before, but the amount of communities that are impacted right now, we just haven't seen in our state before. We do have summary damage reports from 28 different counties right now. There may be more coming in the future as well, but I wanted to give you an update on how people are doing and what resources are available that the state is coordinating with local cities and towns and also counties that have stepped up. Our first responders have been incredible. We've had those that are full-time employed by the county, city, and the state involved, but also a lot of volunteers. So it's been remarkable to watch people cooperate together during these last 24 hours to meet the needs of so many people that were in maybe the toughest day that they faced in a very long time. And again, we have had loss of life in the state of South Dakota. More details I'm sure will be coming out soon about those, but be praying for those families, and if you know them, wrap your arms around them, because these events are unexpected and then very, very tragic for families that it hits so close to home. We did, as a state, open up an emergency operations center. They have been coordinating with all of these counties and many others in the towns already since before the storm even started, but the Emergency Operations Center is open. I did issue an emergency declaration for the state of South Dakota. That starts a process for towns and counties to start evaluating what they want to do as far as resolutions or that they adopt at that level, to start gathering data and information to possibly qualify for FEMA and disaster related expense cost coverage. Also, when we do an emergency declaration, that allows us to use state resources. It allows us to make emergency purchases that we can respond to these towns and communities as well. So that has been done. I would ask that everybody that has been impacted and had loss of property during this to remember that the state does not have resources for that situation. What you should be doing is calling your insurance agency or your agent. You should be calling someone that you typically call when things like this happen, damage to your homes or cars. If you are staying in hotels or incurring expenses, keep those receipts, keep that data, because that may be something your insurance company may want and it may be reimbursable. What happens when we come in for resources that may be available from government entities, that typically is FEMA. And I'm going to have Christy Turman come forward. She's with our Department of Public Safety. She will cover what those thresholds are for a county so that we know what has to happen in that area for FEMA to be relevant and come in. FEMA does come in and help cover costs on public infrastructure. So if we've had buildings like courthouses, power lines down, different things like that that serve the needs of the public, that typically will get covered in a situation like this in the state of South Dakota. The individual assistance to individual families, is very difficult to qualify for. So I just don't want families sitting there thinking that there will be government assistance in a situation like this. Typically, if there is the opportunity for private insurance coverage, that is what would kick in this situation, and those individuals are responsible for that. But we can help coordinate that as well. If people have questions, follow up with us and we'll get that to you. We did have the Highway Patrol and the Department of Transportation down on I-90 and throughout the state on the eastern side responding to accidents. It was a bit of a mess, and we had I-90 closed for quite a few hours yesterday trying to clear trucks and heavy equipment off the roadway so we could get it open back up. The Highway Patrol's been incredible at how they've responded to people all over the state, and so has the National Guard. Last night I activated the National Guard. We have a task force, the 153rd in Huron, that is coordinating our response with other agencies. We have them responding to different communities as well, and this morning many of them will be deployed to those that have been hardest hit. We have every single state agency responding in different areas of the state. We had many people in nursing homes that were displaced because of damage to their buildings. Department of Health and Social Services and Human Services are all responding and helping them find permanent locations. We also are looking at schools, giving them recommendations if they've had damage, what to do with their students. We will be utilizing the wildland fire. Ground crews are heading to Castlewood right now because they've had incredible damage there. And they will be receiving that crew later on today, we believe. There will be about 30 individuals to help them clean up and work on that community. We also have 20 National Guard members that will be coming into Castlewood to help that community get back on their feet and get roads opened up. Most of the families that were impacted there was about 60 homes for sure that had damage that families had to find somewhere else to be. And we do have widespread power outages on eastern South Dakota. In Madison, 50 Guard members will show up there today to help them respond to cleanup and needs that are there. Those National Guard members should arrive within an hour or two if they aren't there already, and be very helpful. There's two towns that were incredibly impacted close to Madison, Ramona and Wentworth. So those Guard members will be going there as well to check and see what they can do to help them and partner with them. In Salem, which was incredibly impacted, their nursing home residents were all displaced. They have been finding long-term facilities for all of them, and they have been placed as well. We do have and are going to utilize the Department of Corrections work release individuals that will respond to help that city in particular. And those folks will all be going, and it will be voluntary if they want to go and help serve that community, which they typically are very much wanting to do that and help the communities in difficult situations like this. We do have many farms and ranches that were impacted too. A lot of times we talk about communities and we forget about those families that are a little outside of city limits that still have been completely devastated and wiped out. We had buildings go down on herds of cattle. A lot of people have had their entire farms almost wiped out. Getting anything replaced at this time of year with our supply chain and the needs that they have to put crops in the field is going to be challenging. I would encourage anyone involved in agriculture that had some damages occurred to their property or livestock to reach out to who you typically do when you have losses. So that would be your insurance agency. Communicate through your extension service. We're used to collecting data through the extension services that are in every county so that we know what the assessments are for losses, so we can compile those and get those in. But then also reach out to the Farm Service Agency. The Farm Service Agency is a federal department that responds to a lot of disaster situations and runs our farm programs in the state of South Dakota. But a lot of what these crop insurance and livestock disaster assistance programs utilize for data comes from the Farm Service Agency. So those are three entities that I believe these ranchers and those involved in agriculture need to reach out to make sure we have the right information to really include in our assessments what the true loss was and how to access different programs that might be available to those kind of losses that they're incurring. We've reached out to all of our tribes. We do have tribes that have some damages to homes. They have not requested any state resources at this time, but we are in constant communication with them. North of Watertown, the Sisseton, Wahpeton, and Oyate have been talking with my tribal secretary, and they are good at this time, but we'll continue to visit with them. And we've communicated with Rosebud as well, and they have responded that there are no requested resources at this time. We do know that the city of Arlington is continuing to evaluate their damage, a lot of damage to businesses. And many of these towns are waking up this morning and not certain yet of what their true losses are. So we will continue to have reports on different communities. You may hear of one in an hour or two that I didn't mention, but that this means that that community is still working with their emergency management director to compile that report to turn into the state. Everyone who is in a county or a town needs to know that the people that is their contact point in their community is their local sheriff, and it is their emergency management director. Everything we do at the state level, the Department of Public Safety, goes through them. So on our Facebook page, we are putting all of the phone numbers and contact points for the counties that have given us reports of damage, but that is who you work through. Remember that many of these counties have many towns that have been impacted. So that emergency management director, that sheriff, may have 5 or 6 different towns and communities they're responding to. Hamlin County, Lake County, McCook County, all hit very, very hard. And those sheriffs, those individuals, and those emergency management directors have a big job in front of them coordinating all that, but the staff is there, and we have deployed public safety regional individuals to those communities to help them and assist with them getting what they need as well. Last night I was in Castlewood and Arlington and Madison talking with them and helping them get going. We'll leave here today after assessing some of the damage we saw here in Sioux Falls, and we'll continue to do that and head to Salem, visit a couple of farms, and then continue on to other communities that are impacted from there. We do have the 153rd, which is helping us with the National Guard out of Huron, but we also have the 211th National Guard unit that was already drilling in Madison. So when I talked about those 50 individuals that were helping, they were drilling in Madison this weekend, and that's why it's working out very well that they'll be there to help them clean up. We did have 11 cell phone towers that were impacted last night as well. Much of our equipment at local airports was affected by the winds that came through. We are compiling what exactly the storm event was in each community. We have one confirmed tornado. Other than that, it looks like a high wind event. And we did lose the use of several pieces of equipment that help us record that kind of data. So we'll gather that from other sources. But these 11 cell phone towers are being repaired and will get back online. If you're seeing some of your services slowed down, it is because there has been damage out there because of that. So I will stand by, and there'll be questions, I'm sure, as well. But I appreciate everybody just has been phenomenal at coordinating the different responses, and we will be in communication with any federal resources that may be available to us as we get through this. And just remember, I encouraged everybody that I saw last night and again this morning that because it is such widespread damage and it's so many communities and people impacted, a little bit of patience with your local response individuals, I think, is appreciated, just because they've got a lot of things to deal with, and there are so many things that are happening across the state. The eastern half of the state was incredibly impacted by this, and it's just very, very grateful to live in a state like South Dakota where everybody understands helping each other. Check on your neighbors, and if you do have some time today, be willing to go help them with some of their recovery and cleanup as well.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Christy Turman with the South Dakota Department of Public Safety. And as Governor Noem reported, as we start the recovery process and move through the recovery, the Office of Emergency Management within Public Safety is going to be working with the counties and the cities to gather data about costs and damage that resulted from this storm. And we will be evaluating moving forward whether or not we qualify for FEMA assistance. And I just want to give you a high-level overview of qualifications that we need for FEMA. There's really two tracks to a FEMA declaration. The first is public assistance. That focuses on repairing and replacing publicly owned infrastructure that's been damaged. And when I say publicly owned infrastructure, I'm referring to roads, bridges, city buildings, courthouses, electric cooperatives. So that's the type of infrastructure that supports communities, and that's what's covered in a public assistance declaration. There are two thresholds that we need to meet to qualify for that type of declaration. The first is a statewide threshold. We have to document $1.63 per capita. So that comes out to about $1.44 million. The second threshold that needs to be met is a county threshold. Any county that wants to be included in that declaration has to document $4.10 per capita for damage to infrastructure, emergency costs of responding, things like that. If there are any insurance proceeds on that infrastructure, that's subtracted from the damage total. The main message today is for cities and counties to start reporting that data to their county emergency managers. They will compile it, and then they will be working with us at the state level to look at that damage and determine if we can move forward in the federal process. The second portion of a FEMA declaration is much more rare in South Dakota, and as the governor said, individual assistance provides federal funding to individual homeowners whose homes were either destroyed or damaged to the point that they are uninhabitable. This type of storm event a lot of it is covered by homeowners insurance. Many homeowners across the state have their homeowners insurance policy in place, and it covers wind and storm damage. So that will be a major factor that we will look at in an individual assistance declaration. In this type of event, it's very unlikely that we would get that type of declaration, but we want homeowners to continue with their recovery, reach out to your insurance agent, do all of those things that you need to do to move through your recovery, just keep track of your costs, and report those damages also to your emergency manager so that they have an idea of what type of damage homes in that area have received. And that is the main message today, is for homeowners to contact their insurance agents and their emergency managers to report that type of damage. But again, individual assistance is rare in South Dakota, but we will take a look at it, and if we do feel we qualify, that's something we will certainly pursue if that's what we need to do.
Regan Smith, Emergency Manager for the City of Sioux Falls. Obviously, very busy night here in Sioux Falls for our first response teams. At 4:41 p.m., a thunderstorm warning was received by Metro Communications. Metro 911 created its first storm-related call for service at 5:02. The backup Metro 911 Communications Center was activated at 5:48 p.m. Metro Communications processed 1,004 calls between their 911 emergency calls and their non-emergency line between 5 and 8 p.m. A normal call volume during that time would be about 50 to 60 calls per hour during that time of day. Agencies within Minnehaha County responded to 461 calls for service between 5 p.m. and 8 p.m. 90 of the calls within the city of Sioux Falls were related to down power lines. As the mayor discussed, we're really asking everyone that received storm damage to call 211, report that damage. Even if they don't need assistance or help with cleanup, we're doing that citywide damage assessment, and 211 is collecting that information for us. And that includes residents, whether they're within the city of Sioux Falls or Minnehaha County. We really want them to call 211 so we can gather that information. And also, I'll just reemphasize, if you need help with debris or tree cleanup, or you want to help, call 211, and they'll get you lined up and as we work through this recovery. Thank you.
Andy Berg, City of Sioux Falls Public Works. Regarding streets and utilities, the street department is currently clearing streets and assessing damage. Our crews are out removing trees that fell in and on the right-of-way. The Light and Power and Traffic Group is actively out restoring traffic signals in areas. We have them on generators in the primary intersections where there's damage. They're being repaired. Power is being restored to those as soon as possible. Some intersections are still basically dark without traffic signals working at the moment. Those should be treated as four-way stops until they are back up and running. Rubble, city will be waiving the tipping fees at our landfill for storm-related debris and woody debris through May 22nd. Those that do bring that material in, you may be asked for what type of material it is and where you are coming from. The landfill serves a 5-county area. The separate loads should be brought for woody debris versus storm-related debris so they can be put in the proper locations. And always be sure that those loads are tarped or securely tied down when you bring them out to the landfill. Woody debris, there's going to be 2 locations available for the city. The 12th and Lyons site behind the Taco Bell there on 12th Street. You would enter off of 12th Street for that. That will be open Monday through Sunday, 7:30 a.m. to 5 p.m. And then at the regional landfill, that is open Monday through Saturday, 7:30 a.m. to 5 p.m. The city is waiving those fees, like I said. The other location, the woody debris can be dropped off, is Mueller Pallet. They're open 7 to 5 Monday through Friday and 7 to 12 on Saturday. Their address is 27163 471st Avenue, Sioux Falls. Please do not pile debris, woody debris out on the boulevards. The city is not going to be going around picking up that material. We ask that if there are branches or limbs in the right-of-way, those that are bigger than 6 inches in diameter or roughly the size of a coffee can, the city will be coming along, and those that are 6 feet or longer, we will be removing those from the right-of-way. Anything smaller than that, we'd appreciate volunteers, neighbors to remove those from the area. If you're unable to clean up branches smaller than that, you can use 211 to look for volunteer services to help you with that effort. As far as utility infrastructure, water reclamation plants, those function throughout the event and are in good shape. Thank you.
Good morning. Steve Colbeck, Principal Manager for Xcel Energy in South Dakota. First of all, Xcel Energy crews are working safely to try to assess the damage and restore customers as quickly as possible. One thing that we need to know is obviously trees, poles, anything that has caused an obstruction. We ask that you stay away from down power lines. As South Dakotans, we want to get out there, we want to clean it up, pick it up, but if there are any branches, anything that's laying across the power lines, please do not go near that, especially if it's metal, sheet metal, grain bins, anything that's been displaced. If it's near, it doesn't even need to be on the power lines. Please stay away from those. And that does not totally include, that does not exclude Sioux Valley Electric or Southeastern, Kingsbury, anywhere there's damage. All of the utilities would like you to please give us some room. More specifically to Sioux Falls, reclamation actually started last night. Our crews have been working through the night. We formally asked for mutual aid and received it. We have all schools, all hospitals, and the water reclamation plant that was actually mentioned earlier are all back on. Some important numbers. We have called in a helicopter to contract with an assessment of the damages. This is and will be a multi-day event for us. Please understand that we will restore power as quickly as possible. 35,500 customers in South Dakota, Southwest Minnesota territory were affected in some way that could have been a momentary or a sustained outage. Right now, 10,500 remain without power, so we've knocked that down considerably already since last night. We have, more specific to Sioux Falls, we have 5,300 currently out, 1,550 in Salem, and 1,000 out in Bridgewater. Those numbers may have actually even changed since these were there, because we have 250 employees and contractors now from Excel in South Dakota and Minnesota on site. We have hundreds more coming from Iowa, Indiana, and Colorado. And a special thank you goes to Black Hills Power in Rapid City. They rolled trucks last night, drove through the night to get to Sioux Falls and help us out. So with that, the 800 number, if you have an outage, and I know that a lot of people in South Dakota just want to pick it up and move on, but please do not assume that we know you're out of power. We've had people who have waited days and we don't know about it. 1-800-895-1999, and that's also on the website for the city that was mentioned earlier. Thank you.
Morning, everyone. Todd Heitkamp, meteorologist in charge in the National Weather Service here in Sioux Falls. Obviously, it was a very active day yesterday and even the day before. I will tell you that our day began yesterday afternoon, about, let's say, mid-afternoon, where the storms were developing out of northeast Nebraska. A tornado watch was issued for a portion of the area. A large severe thunderstorm watch was issued for the area, including Sioux Falls. That mentioned very strong winds with the potential of 80 to 100 mile an hour winds within that watch area. The storms developed and moved quickly to the northeast. We issued our first severe thunderstorm warning for Sioux Falls at 4:40 in the afternoon, giving the city of Sioux Falls, the people that live here and surrounding communities, 22 minutes of lead time. What people did with that lead time varied. We had people driving around. We had a number of people taking shelter, which is good. I will tell you that from my standpoint, the National Weather Service, the media, local officials, did everything they could do to inform the general public. If you didn't know that the storm was coming, I ask you to take this time now to figure out why. To look to see the next time we experience a storm, that you're not one of those people wondering where that storm came from. There's a number of different ways to receive that warning information. All of your phones were activated yesterday afternoon with the wireless emergency alert system. All too often, we kind of ignore that. But if you didn't know, that was a recent change, that at any time a severe thunderstorm warning is issued by the National Weather Service that calls for 80 mile an hour winds, your phones will be activated. If your phone was not activated, check with your local cell phone provider to find out if you have turned that feature off. There are multiple ways to receive warning information. I can grant you this much from my career in the National Weather Service. I have seen many large tornadoes. Many of these people behind me, I've worked closely with them for my entire career. Standing outside looking at that storm coming our way yesterday sent a chill down my spine. You know, it could have been a lot worse. Thankfully, it wasn't. So the next time this does occur, and again, there will be a next time, let's make sure that all of us, not only here in the city of Sioux Falls, but all of us in South Dakota are better prepared and more prepared for the next storm that comes our way, because that's what all these people are up here for. Okay? Thank you.
Good morning, Mike Milstead, Sheriff of Minnehaha County. I want to touch on something Todd said. You said you had 22 minutes, I think, of warning. Tell you a little bit about how we respond to that. We actually looked way in advance of that when the National Weather Service started issuing its watch, and we got regular updates from the Weather Service and from both Todd's group, the city and county emergency managers, letting us know that these storms were rolling our way. We brought on additional staff prior to the warning, and so we were able to double our available number of deputy sheriffs in the field. We sent those deputies then to our campgrounds across the county and parks to let people know that these storms were coming. And then when the warning was issued, we had them placed primarily on the west side of the county as the storm entered the county. I think some of the first calls of the storm came to county and state troopers. One would be at the Hartford Coffee Cup, which was used to be called Tam and Oil at the Hartford interchange and I-90. Significant damage there. There were injuries there. Several semis tipped over on the interstate. Injuries with those. All the windows were blown out of Tam and Oil or the Coffee Cup, and as were the back windows and side windows of vehicles that had stopped there to try to seek shelter from the storm. So there was quite a bit of damage and injury there. In the first 15 minutes of the storm impacting Minnehaha County, we had multiple injury cases. So I want to touch on what the governor said about the first responders, and in particular those that don't get paid for it, the volunteers. We had tremendous response from all of our volunteer firefighters, our volunteer ambulance crews. We had ambulances from Garrettson responding to Baltic, from Del Rapids responding to Colton. They work as one team, and these were all volunteers exposing themselves to high risk during that storm event. Unfortunately, I do have one fatality to report. We had an accident at 511 on 250th Street near 464th. That would be just south of Colton. In that situation, a husband and wife were driving home. They live in Wentworth, and that wall cloud, or the wall of dust and dirt and debris hit them. They slowed down to probably under 5 miles an hour because of the almost zero visibility from the blowing debris, and a chunk of wood came through the window of the car, and ultimately the female, who is 61-year-old Wendy Lape, L-A-P-E, from Wentworth, passed away from her injuries this morning. I was at that scene. I will say that it's just what the governor talked about with the first responders. We had Colton Fire Department, we had Del Rapids Fire Department, Del Rapids Ambulance. We had neighbors that showed up with front end loaders to try to clear the road for the first responding vehicles. And so it took great teamwork, deputy sheriffs, and working side by side. But please keep the Lape family in your thoughts and prayers. As I said, she's from Wentworth, and a real tragedy. I've talked with Todd Heitkamp with the Weather Service. He'll have one of his staff or himself come up to the scene with us to look at it. But as indicated, it was an extremely high wind event. Everybody in this room experienced it at some point or another. I will say that it really impacted the county. We have a lot of grain bins down. The gentleman from XL Energy is talking about electrocution hazards. I will tell you the greatest chance of us having another fatality from this storm will be somebody getting electrocuted today or tomorrow or the next day during the cleanup. And so please, in particular in the city, but also out in the county where all these grain bins are down, a lot of Morton type buildings or steel buildings are down and scattered for several miles. People are going to be picking up metal, and if there's a line even close, that could result in an electrocution. We want to keep what we expect to see is we'll see what has been talked about, and that's neighbors helping neighbors, trying to pick up cleanup, but please, please keep safety in mind, keep those down power lines in mind, because that's our greatest chance of additional fatalities from the storm event.
Sorry, I'm going to come up. I need to make mention of the wind speeds. I forgot to do that. We had measured wind speeds of anywhere from 70 to 105 miles an hour that went through eastern South Dakota. Now, I've gotten a lot of questions about whether or not this was a tornado or not. Folks, this is not a tornado. You're not going to have a tornado this widespread. Excuse me. But I want to contrast the two events, the one in Castlewood and the one here in Sioux Falls. If you saw the video of the tornado that went through Castlewood, you could see everything, right? Nice and clear. Most of the tornadoes around here and across the United States will form on the back side of a thunderstorm. What we experienced here in Sioux Falls was the front side of the storm. You couldn't see your nose in front of you when that storm hit, okay? So they were part of the same storm complex, but they were two separate storms. So one formed the tornado, the others did not. So down here, we experienced the strong winds. Where unfortunately up in Castlewood, they experienced the tornado. But honestly, as far as the damage is concerned and the wind speeds, there's probably not going to be much difference. Most of the damage that we witnessed around here was reminiscent of a very, a high-end EF0 tornado or a low-end EF1 tornado. So again, even though that we didn't have tornadoes here, we still had the damage as a result of the 70 to 100 mile an hour winds. Okay? Thank you.
I need to mention city parks, our city recreation trail, and city-owned golf courses are open. There are some trees down, so we ask the public to give those workers some space, use caution around those as that cleanup is done. With that, we'll open it up for questions for any of the panelists. Any questions?
Do we have a sense, Sioux Falls-wise, of total injuries at this point?
No, I think it's fairly limited in Sioux Falls. Obviously we had one fatality. Most of the injuries that were reported from the hospital ERs were transported into town, but I don't have a number on that.
Governor, do you know, fatalities-wise, I know you said there has been a loss of life. Is that past what's been referred to so far in this conference?
Yeah, so we've talked about 2 here today. Those are confirmed. And we still have gathering assessments from other parts of the state. So I won't speak beyond that. We do have injuries. Quite a few happened on I-90, a lot of accidents in vehicles. People were injured in their homes. We had people trapped in their homes for a period of time that first responders did go in and rescue individuals and take them out and get them to treatment. So our hospitals and ambulance services were remarkable, and even some of the local hospitals took in some individuals from nursing homes and assisted livings that were dependent upon oxygen. Remember, when the generator goes out or isn't working after the electricity has gone out, you've got individuals that have those needs that have to be met, and that was what elevated the immediate response being addressed right away in several of these communities that were dealing with nursing home evacuations. The one thing I will point out is and I think that Todd gave us some incredible advice about getting a warning on storms, and a lot of times people get in their vehicles and want to drive around to see the storm. The deaths that we did see here were people were in vehicles. And so I would encourage all of you to seek shelter when you can. Check on your neighbors if you can. Communicate with them by phone or how you do. But I would encourage you to, when we get these storms, because it could be an active year, that we don't neglect to be responsible and make sure that we are taking shelter.
Todd, is this there's been a lot of words thrown around, derecho, hubbub. Is there a specific word for what happened, or is straight line winds basically the best you can get?
The question was, is there any specific term for what occurred here?
A nasty storm, that would be one I would use. But it's some people have called it a derecho, and we don't use that term during the event, because most people don't understand what a derecho actually is. It's a meteorological term. The most common one that we experienced recently was the one a couple of years ago that went through all of the state of Iowa into Illinois and Michigan. That storm there had comparable winds to what we experienced last night, but the longevity, there's no comparison. That one lasted well into the Great Lakes states. This one here kind of fell apart as it went into central Minnesota. What the other term that you're referring to is called a haboob. That is very similar or very common in the southwestern part of the United States, as well as the states, other foreign countries that have a lot of deserts. It's a windstorm that kicks up a lot of dust or dirt. Very similar to it. We don't usually experience those around here. But again, what caused all this is that when the wind hits that ground, all this topsoil this time of year is exposed. And so it pushes it up, and that's what gave us that dark appearance as it was approaching the city of Sioux Falls. So I'm not going to really term it as anything right now, because we want to do our research to find out really what are the meteorological characteristics that this storm had that is similar to other ones at this point in time. Okay? Yeah.
It was a PDS, severe thunderstorm watch,
Yeah.
issued. Was this the first one, and how many years has it been since?
The question is, this watch that was issued was a PDS, meaning a particularly dangerous situation. Those terms are not used lightly by the Storm Prediction Center out of Norman, Oklahoma. I don't know when the last time we experienced something like that as far as those terms being used with the severe thunderstorm watch. Tornado watch, we've had that recently. But again, I would have to do a little bit more research to find out when the last time those terms were used by the Storm Protection Center for our area with the severe thunderstorm watch.
So with it being a PDS, that means that people should have taken it more seriously than just another regular severe thunderstorm watch.
Well, I don't want people, I guess the question comes in, do we want people to take that more seriously? I don't want people to get hung up on terms, okay? That's for us scientists, us meteorologists to look at. I want people to understand that when they hear a watch, that should start kicking in the preparedness activities for your family and for your coworkers. When a warning is issued, we want you to take action. We don't want you to go outside looking at the storm or anything like that. We want you to get to your place of safety. So I don't care if we call it a PDS or whatever we want to call it. When a watch is issued, no matter if it's a winter storm watch, tornado watch, severe thunderstorm watch, that watch is issued because there's hazardous weather possible for your area. When we issue a warning, other than that, folks, we want you to take warning. We want you to get to your place of action. Because honestly, if you don't take action, that warning isn't worth the paper that it's written on, and I might as well be out of a job. Okay?
Mayor, we had a report of a siren going off in southwest Sioux Falls in the Lincoln County side of town. Any confirmation on that or report?
Yeah, so there's no sirens that went off in the city of Sioux Falls. Maybe there's sirens that went off in T. The policy on sirens is they're tornado sirens. We sound the sirens when there's a spotted tornado. We don't sound sirens for hail. We don't sound sirens for severe thunderstorms. So the sirens did not sound. Policy worked. And so can't speak to what T, Baltic, Harrisburg, what anyone else did, but that's what we did in Sioux Falls.
Do you reevaluate the policy at all with a storm of this nature when you have winds that are basically the equivalent of a tornado?
Well, I think you have to, figure out when is that line. If you start to sound them too often, people start to disregard them. So, this was a very unpredictable weather event. We may look at that again, but right now the policy that we have for assigning them for tornadoes, it worked. We're going to stick with that for now.
For Governor Nome, is there a particular state department that's responsible for relocating the assisted living nursing home folks that are displaced that we should be following up with? Well, the Department of Health was helping those local communities with that. What I understand is they have all, they made temporary shelter, especially in Salem, for the night at the Armory there, but they have found long-term situations for each of those. So they consult with the families in the local community and then look around for different resources that may be available. Our Department of Social Services and our Department of Human Services all have elements to this care in elderly care in the state of South Dakota, so they have coordinated with them as well. But it is always the family's preference and the community where that individual wants to be placed. Many at Salem That facility will be down for quite some time, and they're assessing that kind of damage. Castlewood as well. Those individuals, some of them were transported to Watertown, and I believe were at the hospital to get their oxygen stabilized, and then were placed somewhere else. So all of that is a coordinated response with the emergency management directors and the sheriff in those counties. But we have not had in South Dakota a time where every single agency is on the ground responding like we do in this situation. Because we have the Department of Ag is very involved right now in responding to the needs we have in our rural communities. Department of Education is helping many of these schools and kids that don't necessarily know if they will be able to go back to school right away because of the damage to their buildings. You have the other agencies that work in child protective services and foster care that are heavily involved as well. Department of Corrections is responding, so every agency is involved in different elements. But who coordinates all of that together right now, because this is an emergency response, is the Department of Public Safety. And they have all the first responders and disaster programs and elements underneath them, and they coordinate with those local communities. But those local communities are the lead. Make no mistake that it has to be the local community or the tribe that says, yes, we want help and we need these resources, and then we respond. So that's why, and I want everybody to remember this as well. Everybody feels better when the National Guard shows up, and they're wonderful and we love it. But the problem is they are the most expensive resource to deploy. And so when we deploy National Guard, it is a cost that has to be covered somewhere, and it may or may not be covered out of the state disaster fund, or it may be covered at a federal level, but it is an expensive resource, and also we have other resources that are available. That's why we see our wildland fire hand crew that has been deployed today, and we also have other elements of other agencies that are out there responding as well. But again, those resources today, we have 20 Guard members in Castlewood. We have the 30 wildland fire crew that's going to Castlewood. Salem will be getting some Department of Corrections work release individuals that will be coming in. And then in Madison, we have 50 Guard members that are there, and they'll also be touching base with Ramona and Wentworth as well, because they were heavily impacted. And if there is requests in other communities that are still doing assessments, please reach out through your emergency management director and say, we have a need for some help, and then we will get that resource deployed. Remember, everybody, that there's nonprofits. American Red Cross has been phenomenal. They set up shelters last night in several communities. We had many churches that came in and provided food for emergency operations centers and command centers in many cities, and then sometimes just families brought in and took care of individuals. We had people driving individuals that couldn't care for themselves to other homes, and so that volunteer and nonprofit element is incredible in this, not just within our first responder community, but just neighbors taking care of neighbors. And the fact that they did that is why we, I believe, are getting through this in as best manner as possible, and that people understand the importance of figuring stuff out and working with each other to get the people the care they need. Yeah.
This is probably for Regan or the mayor, but you know, we have viewers that are asking if a tornado and straight line winds can do the exact same damage, why don't we ring the sirens for both?
The question was, if the tornadoes and straight line winds can do the same amount of damage, why isn't the outdoor siren system activated for both? If we activate the system for many uses, many times, individuals are going to come complacent. They're going to be confused about that warning. I will say, Todd and I sat on a national policy committee on outdoor warning siren use and policies, and we looked at those, and it was just that. It was very confusing for the public, and we review these policies time and time again, and have just come to the conclusion this is the easiest, most effective way to save lives. With straight line winds, I will say, and Todd will probably back this up, the length of warning is very short. It's much shorter. It's much more difficult to predict that you're going to get those straight line winds, and versus a tornado. So I think that's where we're at. I think we've got a good policy. Obviously, yesterday it was pretty apparent something was going to happen, and if it takes that siren to get you to take action, there were many other ways, but but it's just really, it was there, and I think we're good. We'll always take a look at what our policies are after these type of things, but I'm comfortable with where the city is at right now.
I just want to double down on that. It's because Todd also alluded to this. There's so many ways that the public has responsibility to stay informed of their surroundings. So everyone has a device in their pocket which warns them of weather events. The media does a fantastic job of this. This didn't catch any of us off guard. And so there are communities I know who sound their sirens for curfew, and they sound their sirens and they lose their efficacy. So in Sioux Falls, the siren policy is we work with the National Weather Service. When they see a tornado and it's spotted and it's confirmed, the sirens blow. That's when we blow the sirens. Will we look at the policy? Sure, but you can see where they start to lose their effectiveness when you cry wolf too often and use the sirens for multiple purposes. So again, it was not a tornado. They are tornado sirens, and we use them when there's a spotted tornado in the city.
Can I follow up real quick, Mayor?
Yes.
Since my name was Hughes,
Yeah.
I will also follow up. The last PDS severe thunderstorm watch was 2014. Okay, it's funny how technology, you got it right away and answer that question. I will tell you that, as Regan mentioned, this is not a decision that has, been just come up with as far as an outdoor warning siren policy. It's been dealt with for many, many years, way back in the 50s and 60s when they were called air raid sirens at that point in time. So the biggest problem that we have across the entire nation is that they're used differently across the entire nation from community to community. And it's very confusing to the general public. Can you just imagine driving from Harrisburg, hearing the sirens there, and coming into Sioux Falls, not hearing it there, and going to a different community? Some of these communities even won't use them for the noon whistle or to activate the local fire department. There's many uses for these sirens, and that the local communities are the ones that make that decision. But I will tell you this much: they are outdoor warning sirens. They are not anything but that, to warn people that are outdoors to get them inside. If you were standing outside when the storm hit, waiting for that siren to go off, you were doing something wrong at that time, folks, okay? They're meant to get people inside to find out more information on local media. They're not designed to be heard inside. It's for outdoor warning purposes only, okay?
Regan or the mayor, so with this 211 helpline and the landing page on the Sioux Falls website, is there resources available for non-English speakers? Is this information available in languages other than English?
Yeah, of course. So 211 will have the ability to, connect people with the right resources based on the language that they speak. The city's website right now is in English only, but we'll be working to translate that, I'm sure, into other languages as needed. Any other questions today? All right, thanks for being here today. Appreciate it.